Man, it's awesome to be with you. I'm very excited to be here. I love talking about happiness. I love teaching and coaching on happiness, mostly because it reminds me about all the things that I did, all the things that I learned to be happier. I'm naturally a positive person, an optimist. Thank you. But there was a season in my life, like a decade of despair, as I think of it, where really things at the church were terrible. Things in my marriage were really falling apart. I was depressed. I became very melancholy all of the time. And I began to wonder, can you be happy when life is miserable? And I wasn't asking that question with a big smile on my face now. I think I was asking that question, in the fetal position, covered in tears and, pouring ashes over my head in desperation. And I have a good friend who is a psychologist, and he and I began studying happiness for 8 years from the perspective of clinical psychology, positive psychology, theology, and Christian ministry. Really trying to figure out, can you be happy? Like, are there things that you can do that will increase your sense of joy, optimism, hopefulness, all that good jazz? And of course, I think so. I mean, I wrote a book to that point. But the question, are you happy, makes women cry, makes men angry, and makes Christians lie. That's been my experience in the last decade, not only researching the topic, but also presenting seminars, much like this one, in all manner of environments, secular businesses, schools, among teachers, among professional associations. My favorite one was doing the federal law enforcement community at their Christmas banquet. I mean, it's been a whirlwind. So what I thought we might do just to get started, because every group is a little different, and I hate the idea that I'd get up here and talk for whatever it is, an hour and a half, and at the end you wouldn't get your questions answered. I thought we'd just start at the beginning by hearing from you. If you could learn anything that you wanted to know about happiness, about how you personally might become happier, what would you want to know? And then I'll write it down in the world's worst handwriting so that I can remember the questions that I'm supposed to answer, and then we'll start there. Sound good? Okay, so is there a microphone system or something that they're supposed to use? Or I think there's boom stands here. If you want to come and stand up at the boom stand, then we'll hear your question, and I'll write it down, and we'll go from there. In the meantime, cue your internal Jeopardy music. I know you're already perfectly happy, and the questions are ridiculous, but this will help.
I could bring the mic to you if you don't want to stand up.
I'd like to know how to keep from the small things in life while you're driving, while you're dealing with people in the grocery store, those kinds of things that really gnaw at your happiness.
Sure. Yep. Anybody else? I told you can't read it. It's for me. It's a trigger for my memory,
Can you differentiate between joy and happiness?
Sure, between joy and happiness, yeah.
How can we help other people believe that there is happiness and joy in life?
Sure.
Is it okay to be happy when others are sad?
Oh man, that was a trip, because I saw a microphone over there, and there was no man, and then there was a man over here. One more time, what was it?
Is it okay to be happy when others are sad?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Who's responsible for our happiness?
Great question. You're the first group of United Methodists to whom I have presented this material, so I just want you to know I'm judging your entire denomination by these questions. Yeah.
How would you inspire happiness and joy in people who are suffering or or dying due to illness or something like that?
These are such good clergy questions.
Are there differences in how different age groups define happiness?
Oh, great question. That's the first time I've ever had that question. Yeah.
How does attitude affect happiness?
Attitude.
Cultural differences around happiness. Can you be more specific about which culture? Like, are you talking about American, European? Are you talking about different socioeconomic status, or just all of it? Yeah, I'm assuming that there are significant cultural differences, maybe ethnic, maybe national, maybe socioeconomic status. There could be all kinds
Sure.
of cultural factors.
Thank you.
How are physical health and happiness related?
Yeah, great question.
Why does our society feel the need to be happy all the time?
Is happiness inbred in your personality?
Oh my dear Lord, where are you? Just wave your hand at me. So okay, is happiness inbred? Okay, good. Happiness. It's like I'm getting punked the whole time, you know. Okay.
How do you resolve the stress between the culture that is around us that is going so anti-biblical, away from the teachings of Jesus Christ? How do we resolve that?
Happily. You mean, how do we happily? Yeah. Okay, anybody else? There'll be opportunity for you to ask questions at the end, and then of course we'll have all kinds of little discussions throughout, but I just want to make sure I get the big rocks in case.
We got one more.
Okay.
I'm just curious. When I'm happy, I feel a certain way. When you're happy, you feel a certain way. And I'm finding that it's really different among people. So can you talk about why happiness feels different to people?
Sure. Okay. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How can a DS? No. Seriously, how does a leader tap into joy? Leaders who are supposed to be joyful and happy, leading at a time when maybe the followers or the group or the congregation is scared to death and not really that happy.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Going once, going twice? Oh, way at the back. I felt like an evangelist there. I see that hand.
How do you maintain happiness when you're around people who are continually unhappy?
Sure. All right.
My last and final question, putting to Jill. How does faith affect happiness?
Yeah. Okay, let me cycle through these. Some of these will have a really similar answer, and I'm going to try and answer them quickly. So if the answer doesn't totally satisfy you, you come find me later, or I may point you at a chapter in the book or something. But there's so much research and nonsense in the back of my head. I'm just trying to give you the quick answers. How can you overcome the small things? Well, first of all, let's just acknowledge you're not always going to be happy, right? I mean, things will interrupt your happiness, and some of those things should appropriately interrupt your happiness. Tragic death should interrupt your happiness. Getting in a fender bender or getting in an accident on the freeway. If you're happy when those things happen, there's something wrong with you. Okay? You need help, right? But the truth is we don't want to deny the fact that life has its challenges, even its small challenges. We just want to bounce back faster. And in general, there's all kinds of little tips and tricks that I use to bounce back faster. You know, I'll practice positive confession. You know, like when the little things bug me. Somebody cuts me off on the freeway, you know, and I start having an imaginary argument against them in my mind that I'm totally winning, and they're just being cut to shreds because they can't handle what's happening, you know. I just confess it and say, Lord, I don't want to be like that, you know, and then get my mind back on the things of God. So I have a really quick swipe process is what I think of it. I just sort of name it, confess it, and move on. And that helps me bounce back a lot faster. Are joy and happiness different? Here's the thing. In the semantic range of both Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic, all three, joy and happiness are synonyms. But Christians often make a big deal about joy and happiness. You know, we say joy is like that deep down resident thing that only comes from the power of the Holy Ghost. Happiness is fleeting and momentary and insubstantial. It's what our culture gives. It's like sugar or candy. And real joy, man, that's baloney. It's just not true. You know, if we do our homework, we realize all those words come from the same bucket. However, I've also learned that nobody believes me when I say that. For example, when I told my dad, I said, he was a pastor, you know, and he said, Dad, guess what I learned? He said, that's not true. I'm like, what do you know? Open up your, no, it's not true. Look at your, it's not true, David, they're different. So, whatever, man, who cares? So, yeah, they're the same unless you're my dad. How do you help others? This is the hardest thing to accept. Where's the tall, handsome fellow that was up here earlier talking about acceptance? There he is. All right, so this is the hardest thing in the world to accept. You cannot make other people happy. Full stop. And nobody can make you happy. Not your wife, not your husband, not your family. They cannot make you happy, and you cannot make anyone else happy. Now, there is a fine hair that I want to split. Because I take happiness from my children, from my wife, from my congregation. I mean, I feel like they're little batteries, you know, little Duracells in my life that catalyze me and invigorate me. But that's different in that I benefit from them, but they're not making me happy. And in large part, the reason I'm able to benefit from them is because of a mindset that I've cultivated, because of a set of disciplines that I've put in place, where I'm not needing anything from them to be happy. I'm just enjoying whatever it is that they give off, put off, are, be, etc. Likewise, you can't really help others be happy. I mean, in a scenario like this, you know, and again, I've done this with thousands of people, the biggest resistance is people will sit here in this kind of setting and they'll go, don't you dare try and make me happier. You nose-ringed weirdo from Canada, I want to talk to you. There's resistance when we try and suggest to others how they might be happier. So the best thing you can do is just love them and not energize some of their unhappiness. And of course, we get much more specific, and we get into pastoral counseling and all that good jazz. But is it okay to be happy when other people are sad? Well, I hope so, or else we'd be miserable every day, all day. Somebody's always sad. I've got a staff of 17 at my church, and it's like running a used car lot, man. Every single day, one of them things isn't going to start, you know. And I walk into work, and I go, oh, great, Brooke's sad today, or oh, great, Terry's sad today, or oh, nuts, I'm sad today. I mean, somebody's always struggling. And the truth is, when we cultivate the disciplines that produce happiness, when we're focused, when we're healthy, that actually gives strength to other people when they're sad. When they're melancholy, when they're depressed, when they're anxiety-ridden, when they're struggling with their marriage, when they're struggling with their children, don't you dare put your light under a bushel. Some of us need that light. Now, we sometimes, you know, want to be cautious that we're not obnoxious in the face of their sadness. Of course, that's just good manners. But the truth is, don't you diminish your sadness to try and make somebody else, or your happiness to try and make somebody feel better about their sadness, or you're going to screw it all up, you know. In Jesus' name or whatever. All right. Who's responsible? You. Me. Now, there's things in life that'll beat you up, right? I mean, you go through cancer, you go through some other terminal illness, you have a major setback in your family, in your home, you have a major setback in your ministerial career. I mean, it's asinine for someone to suggest that in the midst of the worst possible moment, you can, I mean, come on. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for how you feel, how you engage, and how you experience life. And I learned that when I was in the middle of the worst season of my life. That at some point, either Jesus was offering me abundant life or Jesus wasn't offering me anything other than, going to heaven when I die or whatever. And that was really hard for me to accept. Can you inspire happiness in others while they're suffering? Well, that's a tricky question. You can experience happiness while suffering. Viktor Frankl's memoirs, many of you, of course, have read them. They're hugely popularized. I mean, he's a Jewish psychologist who was interred in a concentration camp in the Second World War. But some of the features that stick out to me about his memoirs that are so peculiar are the stories that he would tell about the prisoners playing games, laughing, singing, telling stories in a concentration camp. If they can have moments of genuine happiness in a concentration camp, you can too as a Methodist. I mean, somewhere in there, it's going to be okay, What about different ages and age groups? Yeah, that was such a good question. I'm so glad you asked that. In general, as we get older, we take a higher and higher, we get a deeper and deeper sense of gratification out of our children and particularly our grandchildren. And so we've enjoyed our lives. We get to live it and experience all that we've worked hard to attain. And when we look back and see our kids flourishing or our grandkids flourishing, we see their development, we see their promise, we see what God's doing in their lives. That's a different happiness than when we're in our 40s or when we're in our 20s. I'm not sure that it's better or worse. It's just extra. So great question. Where do we go here? Oh, attitude. Yeah, your attitude. What are all the cute little sayings? Your attitude determines your altitude, determines your aptitude, determines your whatever-tude. Yeah, that's true. Your mindset is probably a better word than attitude, because you don't usually have a chipper mindset, but you can sometimes have a kind of a fake veneer, sort of a plastic happiness. Well, that's not what we're about. We are about training our minds, like Paul says in Romans 12, right? We're renewing our minds so that we're able to enjoy appropriately all of life's pleasures and leisures in the presence of God. Are there cultural differences to happiness? Absolutely. Some of the most stark contrasts are between Western Europeans and Americans. I mean, all the things that we typically really enjoy, they look down on their nose for us. The French have a very different sense of humor than those of us in Oklahoma. I think that's okay. We oftentimes put a lot of stock in our cultural context and assume wrongly that if we were in a different cultural context, we would be happier. We'll get to that here in a moment, but that's a huge fallacy. You can be happy where you're at regardless of where you are. And that's important for us to learn and to accept. How interrelated are health and happiness? Spectacularly. Not in the sense that if you have an illness, you're incapable of being happy, but in the sense that if you will do the things that make you healthy, exercise, eat right, whatever, your body will produce enzymes and chemicals that are just going to give you a little shot in the arm. And this is the number one thing that I find that nobody wants to listen to me on. And I always feel like saying, because I know you're going to listen, you're going to be so excited about this, you probably stand up and applaud. I won't even be able to handle it. But most of the time, when I tell people that exercise will make you happier, they say, but I hate exercising. And I go, well, yeah, I didn't ask you if you liked it. You said, I want to be happier. What can I do? Do you exercise? No. If you start exercising, you'll be happier. I don't like exercise. Well, stay sad then. I don't care. What are you bugging me for? So the truth is, when you do the things that make you healthier, you will be happier, even if those particular things are undesirable to you. Why does our culture want to be happy all the time? Oh, okay, so this really taps into a funny peculiarity among clergy. Why wouldn't you want to be happy all the time? Like, what do you want to be all the time? Angry? Offended? Serious? triggered. The gospel in our culture, like the secular word for salvation, is happiness. So when we tell them that happiness is trivial, it's a vain pursuit, what we are saying is, you're already in hell, why don't you stay there? That's what they hear. Now, I didn't know that when I started this research. I learned that when I was out there doing things in elementary schools with kindergarten teachers, doing things with psychologists and social workers. And as soon as that happiness thing came up, and I would sort of back away from it and go, well, of course you're not going to be happy all the time. It was like they were being shot in the face, like you were taking their hope away entirely. So when the world out there talks about happiness, when they're pursuing happiness, when they're chasing happiness, we shouldn't demean it. We should purify it. We should sanctify it. You want to know what real happiness is? You want to know what that resident happiness is? Step by step, moment by moment, glory to glory, we'll help you understand happiness by God's grace and God's power. And that's really the connection between faith and happiness. You can be a non-believer and still be happy. But the ultimate happiness, where every part of life is optimized, where you're saturated with the healthy vision of Creator for creation, man, I think that's for Jesus people, you know. How do you maintain your happiness? Well, again, you're going to lose it sometimes. You know, I just came off a big project earlier this week. Of course, we put thousands and thousands of hours into something, and then I sat down my staff in we call it Sandbox, our staff meeting on Tuesday, and I just said, hey, just a reminder, you're all going to be depressed tomorrow. You're going to be at the church till 4 o'clock in the morning. You're going to be exhausted. Tomorrow, it's okay. Don't make any big decisions. You know, don't file for divorce. Don't fire your volunteers. Don't run out. You know, just know that that's coming, and that's the truth. We go through seasons, we go through ebbs and flows, and so rather than judging that, we just got to step back and go, okay, Lord, I'm empty, and I trust that you're going to refill me and you're going to refuel me, and as that continues to happen, I'm going to receive it. How can we be happy as leaders when everybody else is sad, when the situation is tense? Man, I think that is the chief challenge of leadership today. How can I receive the gospel I am offering to my people? How can I embody the Spirit-filled, Spirit-fueled, Spirit-led life that the Lord has called me to preach about? That's not easy. And how do we do that? Well, we do it primarily by thinking of ourselves as people before we think of ourselves as leaders. And we got to just let all the good stuff in us flow out. And if there's nothing good, it's a little late to get it on a Sunday morning at 8:30 before the first service. So we just remember we got to be in that process of God filling us up daily and daily renewing us, and that's a challenge. You know, how much of happiness is our personality? A little bit. We'll talk about that in a second in greater detail. Can you be happy in seasons of conflict? Yes. Yes. Now, if you're nose to nose with somebody and you're in the middle of a heated debate, of course you don't feel happy in that exact moment. That would be agitating. That would be unnecessarily instigatory. I mean, that's bad. But an hour later, 2 hours before, in that season, yeah, you can. And it's hard. It's hard. It requires tremendous mental and spiritual discipline. But yes, it's possible, absolutely. And I can attest to it. Is happiness different for everybody? Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know what everybody else feels. I don't know what everybody else is going through. I just know that you know what happiness is for you, and whatever that is, man, we can help you figure it out. We shouldn't try and define each other's happiness or squabble over it, which sometimes occurs, you know. But the truth is, we all have little different personalities. We have different outlets. We have different giftings. We have, you know, we're just different. And so we ought to celebrate the good things that are happening to other people rather than, you know, comparing and contrasting. All right, those are your first questions. Tell you what, take 60 seconds, turn to the person next to you, and answer the single most important question of the day. Is this baloney? Dr. Marty Seligman, who's the the founding father of positive psychology, and the current president of the American Psychological Association, came up with a formula for happiness. And we might quibble with the formula, but it's just a good starting point. And so he says that the H is going to stand for what? Yeah, happiness. Okay. Now the S, any guesses what the S stands for? Situations. What else? Just shout it out. Self. What else you got? Satisfaction. Salvation. Well, that's good. We'll rewrite it. And then, yeah, it stands for your set range. So the whoever was asking about your personality, that's what we're talking about. Some people are just bubblier and more optimistic than others. And one of the greatest threats to our happiness is the fear that in order to become happier, our personality will change, or must change, and it must change into the personality of people we don't like. So most people will sit there and go, if you tell me that I got to become more like a cheerleader to be happy, I'm going to punch you in the mouth, because I don't want to do that. I'd rather just be miserable. No, that's not it. You don't have to fake it till you make it. You don't have to put on airs. You don't have to pretend. Whatever your jam is, right? You got your life. You have a control group of your life. You've got a data set comprised of your life from birth till right now. So you know when you were at your happiest. You know what the optimum happiness has been at this point for your life. You know if it's just peaked, the moment that you got to propose, the moment where you received your doctorate of ministry, the moment where you opened up your own business, the moment where you scored the game-winning touchdown. I mean, you know whatever the thing is that is your happiest moment. So great, that's the peak. And the more you cultivate the disciplines that we'll talk about today, the more you invest yourself in the development of your happiness, your happiest moments will improve. And we'll make up a number here. There's more science to it than this, but you can jump up by 10%. And then the frequency with which you get into that happiest range will increase dramatically. So we're not trying to turn you into somebody not like you. We're just saying there's ways for you to live at life's optimum more frequently, and there's ways for you to experience an even higher high by changing some of the stuff we do and how we think and all that good jazz. So that's happiness is your set range, plus C. Anybody guess what C is? Anybody guess out loud what circumstances are? Thank you. I just blew it. Sorry. Okay. Circumstances. I just gave you the answer because I wasn't paying attention myself. So circumstances. Your circumstances. If you're in the midst of a divorce, you will be sadder than on your honeymoon. We hope. My mom and grandmother were traveling a number of years ago in the Holy Land, and my grandmother took sick. And they spent 4 months in a Jerusalem hospital. It is a lot trickier to be happy in a Jerusalem hospital than it is just about anywhere. Right? Your circumstances, and there's no point pretending they don't. But usually when we think about our circumstances, we think about a couple of big things. Where we live, our house, our apartment, whatever. We think about our job. Do we like our job? Is it fulfilling? Is it satisfying? And we think about our money, how much money we make. And we assume, mistakenly, that if we had a nicer house, we would be happier. We assume mistakenly that if we had a job we liked better, we were at a church we liked more, we're at a school we like better, whatever, that we'd be happier. And if we made more money, we'd be happier. And the research just doesn't hold that out. The truth is, when you get into a new living situation, so that's your home, yard, neighborhood, and your commute, you will adjust to that within 3 months. So however happy you were on Monday, if on Tuesday you buy a new house and you get the house of your dreams or whatever, 3 months from Wednesday, you're going to feel the same way. Likewise, if you get into a new job, new school, new posting, whatever, 3 months down the road, possibly you can hang on to that honeymoon for 6 months, but you'll be at the same level of happiness. If you want to experience happiness in your job, again, we'll talk about this here momentarily, then you got to find meaning in the job you have now. And the skill of finding meaning wherever you are, that's an essential skill in being happy. And then last, of course, is money. There's a funny statistic about money, is that money doesn't make, however much money you make, it really doesn't make much of a difference at all until you make currently about $120,000 US a year. And then there's a tipping point from, it doesn't really matter, doesn't really matter, doesn't really matter. This is fantastic. So if you get really rich and you need a pastor in whom you want to invest, we'll talk. And I'll trade you happiness for money. That'll be just perfect. Yeah. So happiness equals your set range, basically your personality, your circumstances, and then V. And this is really the trick. This is what the book, The Adventure of Happiness, is all about. Anybody got any guesses? Vision, that's a good guess. Values, vocation, virtues. It's your voluntary activities. It's what you do on purpose. Now, this blew my mind. Happiness is primarily about what you do regardless of how you feel. So most of the time, based on the way we feel, that's what we're going to decide, right? I feel sad, so I'm going to lay on the couch and watch Netflix. And it's our feelings that are driving our behaviors. If you can reverse that and just start by doing the things that we know produce greater happiness, your feelings will follow. And of course, the trick is that we don't want to. I don't want to do the things I don't want to do. But if our larger goal and ambition is to be happier, to experience life at its optimum, to enjoy all the things that the Lord has made available to us, then it actually starts with what we do on purpose. And so that's what The Adventure of Happiness is really about. It was me saying, okay, well then what are the best practices? What are the best evidence-based, research-born practices that we know make people happier? And in the book, on the flyleaf, there's 100 words of happiness. That's all the best research condensed into basically a meme. And we can blow it up into big, broad categories. That happiness is about what you do. It's about your work and how to find meaning in it. It's about how you eat, not just what you eat, but how you eat. Happiness is about rest and sex together. Basically everything you do with your bed. And happiness is about screens. Screens are, cell phones, iPads, tablets, television, Netflix, these things. Screens are a massive factor in whether or not you're happy or not all the time. And then happiness is also about, the other category that happiness is about who you are becoming. Because a growth mindset, the idea that you're getting better and better, that you're developing, that you're moving forward, that's essential. And that growth mindset pays for the biggest dividends in the following areas: your thoughts, your legs, like your exercise, your fitness, your heart, meaning your loves, your family, your friends, your romantic entanglements, whatever. And last but not least, the way you speak. So we're going to take a break here, just a short one for you to turn and talk to each other, not a run out and go watch a movie break, just a short, 2-minute break. And I want you to ask the people around you, or share with the people around you, where you perceive your biggest opportunity is. Looking at your life fairly, knowing that we're all pretty happy, but we could all be a little happier. Where is it? Is it in The way you eat? Is it in the way you work? Is it in the way you view your bedroom and the activities therein? Is it in the way that you interact with screens? Any of those four, or the other four in the other category? Is it in the way you think? The sense that you envision yourself becoming a healthier, happier, more perfected version of yourself for God's glory? Is it in the way you exercise? With the sense that you're becoming a more vitalized human being? Is it in the way that you love, both receiving and giving love, all kinds of love? We all have sermons on love with the 782 Greek words for love that C.S. Lewis taught us, right? Was it love? Or is it in the way you speak? So take just 2 minutes, turn to each other and share, and then we'll get back on it, and we'll look at each of those in depth. Again, it's just so fun to be doing this. Thank you. And I feel like we trust each other now. That's why I can show you my tattoos, or some of them, just... I was visiting a church. I was invited to speak at a church a couple weeks ago, month ago maybe, and I came in and I was wearing a short sleeve, dress shirt, and it was a casual church, a contemporary church, and I sit at the back, and someone tried to introduce me to Jesus, and I said, thank you, I have to go preach now, so, but I'll let the Lord know you were thinking about me. Thank you. Let's look at these real quick, and of course, there's so much more detail and so much more information in the book, and one of the things that I was hoping to do with The Adventure of Happiness was give you clues and tips to where else you might look for more information. Because there's just, taking 8 years of research and trying to stick it into one colorful little book is tricky, But one of our greatest sources of happiness is our work, which is so counterintuitive. I grew up in church, in a good church, what I thought healthy church, and I think most of the messages that came to me about work was that work was drudgery, that work was a necessary evil, that going to work was the thing you didn't want to do, and coming home from work was the highlight of your day. Not only does the research not bear that out, for most of my adult life, I felt really guilty for enjoying what I do. I love my job. I love it. I've had many jobs. I have learned to love most of them. The one that I'm currently doing now for most of my time, I think is spectacular. And if you can embrace your work as a representation of your development. That's where you're creative. That's where you're innovative. That's where you're pouring in your passion and your fueling. For me, I think of it as a calling. And in fact, that calling mindset, regardless of what your profession is, if you feel called to be a college professor, if you feel called to be a graphic designer, if you have a sense of meaning and purpose in your work, your happiness quotient is going to skyrocket. And the trick is that you can have that no matter what your profession is. And the most famous example, I think I wrote about this in the book, is about two janitors working in, I think it was the Mayo Clinic. And they interviewed one janitor, and they said, what do you do for a living? He says, well, I clean floors, and I clean up vomit, etc. They interviewed the other janitor, what do you do? I save children's lives. They're both pushing mops. But one's collecting minimum wage and one's... So if you can perform the necessary mental gymnastics on yourself to find meaning in your work, and meaning is primarily a sense of connection between past, present, and future for you or for others. So if you find some way in which you're giving someone a future or you're enlivening the future of others, you'll find meaning in your work. If you can make a connection to your own history, what you're doing now. For example, I pastored just outside of Detroit. It was a great surprise to me to learn that my grandmother grew up in Detroit, my paternal grandmother. And when I discovered that, I immediately felt better about my job, better about where I was, because my family story already had roots in the Motor City. And so then I felt connection. That's meaning. And if you can find meaning in your work, your happiness will increase dramatically. And as an aside note, there's a pamphlet out there of a project that I'm starting this year. And I think it's the most meaningful thing I will have done or ever do. Because there's nothing like it in the world. Now, I've been all over the place. I've been to 40-something countries. I've taught at 6 seminaries in the United States and a few others in Canada, Europe, and Africa. I can tell you there's no headquarters, there's no place that gathers Christian innovators. So I'm going to start one. And when I look at that, I go, as an 18-year-old, I needed that, and I couldn't find mentors. I couldn't find people to show me the way for how to be a creative, godly, out-of-the-box pastor. As an adult, most creativity was geared towards the arts. And so the arts are great. I don't want to diminish that. But what about leadership creativity? What about homiletical innovation? What about liturgical innovation? There's just not a place to do that. So I tell you this because it's meaningful to connect our past, our present, and our future. It's meaningful to look backwards and help other people look forwards. That's how we find meaning in our work. The way we engage with food is another huge source of happiness. Because for most of us, food is either something in which we totally overindulge and then feel badly about later. Right? We eat comfort food, we eat too much of it, we make jokes, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do something different next Thanksgiving. But the number of people that feel really, really badly about how they look, how they feel, their eating habits, what they give themselves permission to enjoy to excess, that's huge. We all have mirrors. We know what we look like. I was 65 or 75 pounds obese when I began researching happiness. And I know when I was an athlete in college, and so I knew all the stuff, but my relationship with food was killing me. And I don't intend that we all become clean eaters training as though we live for a marathon. I like to enjoy things. For example, last year, or a couple years ago, I went on a sabbatical. I went to Italy. I was doing a tour of catacombs. I ate gelato 4 times on the first day. I was there for 4 days. I think I had gelato 21 times in 4 days because we serve a good God. So it's not so much that we have to find ways to become puritanical in our food consumption. We just have to figure out what food is for. And I think if biblically you're to look at food, you can develop a pretty robust theology of eating. And you can talk all the good stuff about, the Creator and creation and how we're conjoined with creation and a part of it and how creation sustains us. And that's good. That's really, you could all do that already. Food is also meant to be enjoyed. We will only need nourishment on this side of eternity. What we will require forever is taste. So food is meant to be enjoyed. It's pleasurable. And sometimes Christians develop a sort of an ascetic sensibility. Like St. Francis, who used to pour ashes in his food. Hey, St. Francis was amazing. That's dumb. Right? Things are meant to be enjoyed. And that's a manifestation of God's blessing, not disobedience to this strange monk-like fascination we have cultivated in 21st century American Christianity. So we want to enjoy our food. We want to enjoy the people who share food with us. And when we think about food, perhaps the best mentality is there's a fitness philosophy that has a tagline, eat to perform. That's a really great way to think about food. Food is fuel. I want to enjoy the fuel I put in my body. I want to enjoy other people around me as we are refueling together. It feels good to get some new fuel in your body. But if I stick a hose into my car at a gas station and I keep filling till it's overly full, that's really dangerous. It stinks. It's messy. Well, the same thing is true with food. You eat too much, you stink. You're messy. We got a problem. So think about Food is fuel, eating to perform. And again, the point is not to judge people about how they eat or how they eat food. No. The point is just if you want to be happier, think about food differently. Okay? So, forge, food, bed, by which I mean both rest and sex. You'll notice that these are metaphors, right? I mean, a forge is a place where you can apply your craft and become creative with the tasks. Food, of course, is not a metaphor, but I tried. Bed is the place where we rest and where we experience intimacy. And let's separate those just momentarily because the data gets confusing sometimes. But the first thing we have to learn about rest is that rest is not the same thing as inactivity. It's not. So when we're tired, most of us, if we work 12, 14-hour days, we come home, we're exhausted, we sit on the couch, and then we never leave the couch. And at the end, we still feel really tired, and we go to bed really tired, and then we wake up really tired. Because sitting is not resting. There was a season in my life during the decade of misery and woe where every night I would go down, I would sit with my children, and I would eat a giant bag of potato chips every night, and I would drink 2 craft beers every night. I don't know if that's bad or not here, but just for purposes of this story, but I drank 2 Fagos, whatever. Don't judge me. Knock it off. Okay, so big bag of chips, two adult beverages, and I was so gross. I mean, I just felt gross. But I like potato chips, and I like Faygo, and I did that for well over a year before I realized, like, I'm coming home tired. I'm tired that whole time, and then I'm tired when I go to bed. If you want to rest, you have to find, this is the best definition of rest, you have to find something you love for which you feel no guilt. So maybe that's, playing racquetball. Maybe that's walking the dog. That could be cooking. But you got to limit the amount of time that you are just sitting. Sitting is the #1 killer of American adults. You are sitting yourself to death. And of course, if you're like me, most of my job at work is sitting. People come in, they need to talk about their issues, so we sit down. I've got to answer emails, so I sit down. So I did all the tricks. I put in standing desks, and I'll meet people for standing meetings now, and all that good stuff. But the important point is just to recognize when you're tired, you got to find something to do. And if you need to sit just because your feet are sore or whatever, limit it to 20 or 30 minutes. Anything beyond that is hurting you, based on the best research we have. So you got to rest. You got to rest, and you got to clear your mind of the days. And then, of course, the other part about the bed is you need to have a healthy sex life. And I think we're all adults, and so you sort of know whatever those boundaries are. But the #1 cause for divorce in America among men is lack of sex. And the #1 cause for divorce in America among women is infidelity. And we pretend that sex doesn't really matter, especially in the church. We sort of talk about it as though it's something nice, or we use the term intimacy, which is such a terrible term. And the truth is, because we don't address the issue, our marriages are just collapsing left, right, and center. So we have to reclaim the joy of sex. We have to reclaim the godliness of sex. We have to reclaim the pleasure of sex, and we have to do that. That are biblically consistent. We have to do that in ways that are honest about our own relationships. And I'll tell you, when I address happiness outside of Christian context, the #1 thing that women in particular will ask about is sex. That's what they want to know about. Is it possible to be happy if you're sexually unfulfilled? Is it possible to be happy if you're with somebody, or in a relationship with somebody whose libido is way lower than yours or way higher than yours? I mean, that's what they want to talk about. So if we, as a district, if we as a church are interested at all in engaging our culture with their wounds, with their hurts, with their needs, this better be a topic of conversation. Then screens is #4. Again, we're talking about your iPhone, we're talking about your iPad. We're talking about any screens, including these. Our relationship with screens can rob us of happiness. Oh, we got a mic dropping out? No, I thought you heard me talk about sex. You were coming for an altar call. I was saying. I got really nervous. I didn't know what I was going to say. Yeah, our relationship with screens. And the biggest thing, let me give you a for instance, okay? Because there's a big generation gap, right? And a big gap in understanding from the builder generation, the greatest generation, to the baby boomers. Those two groups don't quite click. And then there's a huge gap between the baby boomers and Generation X, especially about media and technology. And then there's a chasm from Gen X to Gen Y. I mean, we're not even talking the same language, okay? And we all come together around Facebook. I mean, grandparents love Facebook. That's the highest percentage of Facebook users is old people looking at little people, right? We just like the heck out of that thing. Or sharing strange articles about things that aren't true and we haven't fact-checked. That's the other thing. And so usually with Facebook, we sort of give everybody a free pass, but the amount of anger we feel when we see people doing this is alarming. We hate this. So anything we hate that deeply that's not sinful, we should maybe just ask a couple questions about why we're feeling that way. And then when we go back to the scripture and we labor to come up with these huge arguments about why this is sinful. A, we have too much free time. And B, again, I think we're really villainizing something that this is the way the world works now. So you can curse it, or you can try and understand it, and you don't have to embrace it, but you should at least play fair. Your grandchildren will spend their whole lives doing this, or I mean, that's their world. That's the world of my children. My daughter really likes a cartoon, and she's 12 years old right now, and she's amazing. She's better than your kids by 100 times. I mean, she's. And so we'll watch Netflix or we'll watch TV on the PlayStation, and we had a guy come and live with us, a friend of mine. His son came and lived with us for about a year and a half. And on my daughter's birthday, he gave her a DVD. And we didn't think anything about it, And she got the DVD in her hand, and she looked at it, and she went, "Daddy, it's broken." I was like, what the heck is going on right now? My daughter doesn't know what a DVD is. And we have like hundreds of them. But that's just an example of how different things are for me as a 41-year-old to her as a 12-year-old. I mean, it's huge. So your screens can totally rob you of your happiness just by virtue of the fact that you're judging them so much. The amount of anger and dysregulation we feel, we ought to just relax a little bit and start by, if we went to Africa and everybody in Africa had a thing they did, we wouldn't ever judge it because it's a different culture, it's a different world, it's a different way of living. If we all went to New Zealand and everybody in New Zealand had a certain habit, of a certain way that they drank their tea or a certain way that they strolled down the road, we wouldn't criticize it. Why do we feel okay doing that with our children? Their world is different than our world. And if we're going to be happy, we need to at least accept that and embrace it. The other thing that's amazing is video games. Man, do we hate video games. We are convinced that video games are the source of all violence, pornography, murder, etc. in the universe. That's just not true. That's not true. In fact, by and large, video games are a very, very healthy pursuit for the cognitive development of young people. Up to a point. Video games make them better problem solvers. Video games teach them how to manage their anger and frustration. I keep saying there as though I've never played a video game. I may have once or twice indulged, but the truth is they make you so mad. Like so mad. They make you more angry than football. They make you more angry than circles of friends at school. They just make you mad because they're hard. And so when I watch my son playing video games, and he's playing, whatever all the big games are. Red Dead Redemption 2 right now is a violent cowboy game that he's playing, I say that makes him more angry than shoveling the snow in the Michigan winter. And that's worth paying attention to, because every time he's that angry, his capacity to suppress and appropriately deal with his anger is forced to improve. So he's able to better control his fury than his dad, because he has more practice with it. Now, again, video games are a healthy pursuit for our young people, and I realize, you're their parents or grandparents, so you're going to make the rules, and that's appropriate. I suggest playing with them. That's the best practice, rather than judging whatever's happened and, making snide comments and walking off. Just sit there with them, because it's a really social activity, and they love it. You sit down and play video games with a young person, they're your best friend for life. They think you're the coolest old person that ever lived, And I still don't feel like I'm old, but I know that to young people I'm so aged and infirm. They just call me Gandalf. They can't even handle it. So play with it, and then the tipping point is 3 hours a day or 21 hours a week. That's when video games go from becoming healthy developmentally to becoming spectacularly unhealthy in a hurry. And it's not that they make people more violent, they just reduce empathy. So there's no link between violent video games and violent real-life behavior. There is, however, a link between video games in excess of 21 hours a week and children who are emotionally unavailable, unsociable, and withdrawn. So if you want your kids to be happy, or your grandkids, allow them to play video games, play them with them, that's the best, and then just, 3 hours a day is probably enough, which seems like so much until you realize that that's really common. And as an aside, if you're somebody who loves to play the little games on your phone, Candy Crush, etc., you might just keep an eye on how long you're playing. All right, so that's one whole category of the book, are the things that we do. And those things will produce happiness. In the book, I think I made a mistake. I wasn't sure whether I should start with the things that we do that make us happier, or if I should start with the promise of who we're becoming. I wasn't sure which part should go first. So I decided to flip half the book upside down. So no matter where you picked the book up, it was like a novelty. Maybe you're starting with the part about what you do. Maybe you're starting with the part about who you're becoming. I thought it was really clever. Everyone has hated it. Hated it, hated it, hated it. If you hate it, I don't want to know. You just have to hang on to that information for yourself. Okay, so the other half of the book, the other half of the material that we found is that happiness is about the promise of who you are becoming. Because a growth and development mindset, the sense that you're going to become a better version of yourself, and of course there's good scripture to this effect, right? That we're shining like stars, we're billboards of, advertisements, living letters, all that good stuff in the New Testament, right? But the sense that you're becoming a better version of yourself for God's glory is huge. It's huge in allowing you to feel like you're happy. So you got to learn how to control your thoughts or renew your thoughts. And the number one mistake that we make here is that when we have negative thoughts, when we speak down to ourselves, we all try and do what? Stop. You can't stop from thinking certain things. It's impossible. Your brain is processing way too much data, way too quickly. You can't stop. You can't stop a train. You cannot stop your mind. What you can do instead is amplify the good things that are in your mind. Think of it as turning the volume up on the good things and turning the volume down on the bad things. And you can aim your thoughts. And this was the most helpful thing in the world to me, is to learn how to aim my thinking. And that's largely the substance of our conversation this afternoon about hope. And again, we'll come back to that later. But aiming your thoughts is a far more effective strategy than stopping your thoughts. The trick for me is that the scripture says, take every thought captive. So that sounds like stopping. And so I've just had to learn to balance that as thinking when the negative stuff comes up, I grab it and shove it aside while I continue to move in whatever direction. But that's what we have to learn, is to amplify our thoughts. And there's a little note on your program here that about memory and gratification and savoring. These are 3 really healthy practices that are all mental practices. And if you can identify happy memories, that'll trigger you out of a bad mood really, really quick. I use my phone for that. I'll cycle through all the pictures in my phone. I only keep really happy pictures in my phone, things that I know are going to be triggers for me. You know, here's my daughter playing with the dog. Here's my friends and I dressed up for All Saints Day, whatever. I mean, that's what I keep. Here's my wife and I dancing. I keep those so that I can trigger myself back into a better frame of mind. And savoring is the ability to enjoy an experience as it's happening. And it requires a tremendous amount of mental reframing when the experience isn't all that enjoyable. And I don't like the language about being present, you know. That's a really common thing. You know, you just got to be present. You got to be in the moment. You got to sink into it. That always feels a little hinky to me. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It just doesn't click for me. So I like the language of savoring because it's hard. Like, how do you savor sitting in a brown pew for 2 hours? Like that takes some work. So the challenge is appealing to me. And my friends will jokingly say, your task today is to make every single moment the greatest moment of your entire life. Which, of course, you can't, but it's just a fun little game. And so that helps. So that's memory saving. And anticipation is the idea that we take more pleasure, or at least as much pleasure, out of an event in advance. So if later on, like if tonight you've got a great party that you're going to go to and all your friends are going to be over at your house and they'll be celebrating you, you can kind of daydream about that. And that helps because you're aiming your thoughts. And so if you're like me and you struggle with anxiety or you struggle with depression or sometimes you get melancholy or you become defeatist, don't try and stop all those things. Just look at your happiest memories and energize them. Look at the moment that you have now and think, how cool is it, God, that I get to come here and learn about happiness? And I don't know that I really needed that or even wanted it, but what a neat opportunity for me to just figure out what abundant life looks like and press into it from a different angle, right? And that's all mental retraining. Are you bored? Okay, I'm just checking. No, that is a great mustache. Listen, I don't know anybody else in the room that has that. That is spectacular. That you could clean a gym floor with that thing. I mean, that's... All right, so yeah, our mind. Then our legs. This is the exercise one that nobody wants to believe me about. But it's just the biomechanics of it. You go out and exercise, and your body's going to create serotonin. Your body's going to create endorphins. You're going to get dopamine. You're going to get all this because you're going to feel better. Now, you won't feel better when it starts, especially not at the beginning. So if you go out and run today for 1 mile, and you have not run for 20 years, you are going to hate your life. I will seem like the biggest liar in America. But run for 10 days for a mile. Stretch. Warm up to it. Walk for a half mile, then run for a mile, then walk for another half mile. I mean, just start somewhere and do what you can. Running is the freest, bestest exercise. But if you can do a little bit of weight training, that's going to help you a lot too. Again, just because different things happen in your body. The joke is that you should never skip leg day. And you know what leg day is, right? That's when you do all the heavy things where you put a big barbell on your back and you squat. And I've split 3 pairs of suit pants in 2018 because I have not been skipping leg day. It's a great source of frustration and also pleasure for my wife. It's great. So, but that's exercise. You just got to find something that you can live with. Racquetball works. You need to exercise, and this is the data. You need to exercise at least 3 to 4 times a week, regardless of your age, for 30 to 45 minutes per time where your heart rate is over 180 beats a minute. 3 to 4 times a week, regardless of your age, for 30 to 45 minutes at a time. Right? On the low end, it's because you're trying to maintain or just get used to fitness. On the high end, it's because you're trying to either press toward a goal or become more physically active or vital or lose weight. So 3 to 4 times a week, 30 to 45 minutes at a time with your heart rate above 180 beats a minute. That's fast. And the reason is you don't get any of the benefit. If your heart rate only gets up to like 100 beats a minute, you're doing nothing. You're walking. But if you want the benefits, you gotta push it. Your heart, how we give and receive love, that's huge. Many of us don't have the ability to receive love. It's like all our ports are shriveled up. Sometimes we're really good at giving it out, but we're really scared about giving it in or receiving it. We in this room probably have the most resources about love. We probably know better than most groups of people what love is. I like Gary Thomas' book, The 5 Love Languages. That's a really great primer for understanding how you're wired, how your partner's wired, how you can bless them and serve them. That's also a really great way to understand yourself. C.S. Lewis wrote The 4 Loves, which is maybe a little headier, but not quite as practical. But just figuring out how we love our spouse, our significant other, how we love our children, what it's appropriate for us to do when we receive or give love to our children and our parents, that vertical love. Friendships is a huge one. Adult men in particular are so lonely and so ashamed of being lonely, they're angry that they're lonely. Which, P.S., when you're ashamed and angry, that's a really great way to make friends. Everybody wants to be around you. So you know, there was that famous book, Bowling Alone, that came out a couple years. The truth is just we have to find out how to have friends. And for many men, especially in church, the biggest barriers to friendship are the fact that all the things that traditionally men enjoy are frowned upon by the church. Being loud, being uncouth, smoke, fire, barbecue, cigars, whatever the things are, you're not supposed to do them. Knock it off. And so as a result, we just lie about wanting those things, and we get smaller and smaller and more retreated from our families until we're all by ourselves. And then many men will, at that point, lash out and abandon their family because they feel as though their family has killed them. In reality, their cowardice has killed them. And so we need to, again, figure out how we have mature masculine friendships for which we feel no guilt. And that's easier said than done, but somebody should at least say it. There is, of course, also a problem with loneliness among women, but it's less, statistically, it's far less pronounced than among men. So we need to find out how to give and receive love, romantically give and receive love in our families, and give and receive love socially among peer groups. I also think it's worth mentioning that the culture is changing so rapidly, we're increasingly seeing a high percentage of platonic male and female friendships, which in the church, I think we're a few steps behind that because we feel like there's so much danger there. But that's something to at least watch out for and to notice. And then last but not least, you'll be happier if you can learn how to speak differently. I'm naturally sarcastic. I am cynical. I think I'm really funny. It's hard for me to acknowledge the truth that sometimes the things that I think are funny make me sadder. So cynicism, for example, especially growing up in church as a pastor's kid, they told me I was a PK when I was little. I was puke without the vowels. That's the first joke I remember from my childhood. You know, I've seen everything in church all over the world. I know what church is like. So as a result, when I go to church, there's a little train of funny comments running through my mind. Sometimes I'll make those jokes. I make them now less than I used to because I realize the more I give into that, the less I enjoy church. And I actually want to enjoy church. I want to hear a fresh perspective on the movement of God. I want to be caught up in the exuberance and rapture of worship. I want to feel as though my prayers matter. I want to feel as though my participation in the body of Christ is a manifestation of God's Spirit. I want those things. And I can't have them if I'm running my mouth the whole time. So that's a good example of how the way we speak, even if it's not necessarily sinful, even if it's trivial, the way we speak can reduce and live in our happiness. And now, at this point, people sometimes get concerned that what I will advocate is unilateral positivity. I've had to learn how to speak more positively. I often feel positive. I had to learn how to vocalize it. But there's a breaking point there. And I think probably you know this. You've probably been around somebody who's just always positive, such that it doesn't mean anything, and you just sort of ignore them because you think they don't have anything of substance to say. And the research about positivity strongly suggests that a 3-to-1 ratio is about the most any group of people can handle. 3 positive statements or affirmations to everyone, either realistic statement or grumpy one. And of course, that conflicts with some older research that probably many of you heard, that for every negative thing you say, you got to say 7 positive things to reverse it. So then we're all doing math in our heads, trying to figure out how nice we should be to each other so we don't blow up the church. And the truth is, the more you work on your spirit, the more you refine your heart, the more your mouth will change as a result. And then, of course, the happier we're going to become. All right, that was a lot of material, so we have one more thing that we're going to cover here in a moment about stress, and then I'll take a bunch of questions. But for now, take just 2 minutes and go back to the people you were talking to before and revisit the question, where do you think your biggest opportunity for increased happiness is? Is it in, your work, how you eat, sex and rest? Is it to do with your screens, or is it about your thoughts, exercise, how you love, or how you... Jane McGonigal is the author of a book called Reality is Broken, another one called Super Better. She was the first PhD to do her research on video games, and she introduced me through her work to a concept called eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S. It's good stress. Now, when I was first entering ministry in Canada, the godless north, we were told in our ministerial training composition that the 3 most stressful professions in Canada at the time were, number 3, prostitute, number 2, pastor, and number 1, air traffic controller. So somewhere between like watching the streets and watching the clouds, pastoral ministry sort of came in at a really undesirable level of stress. And ministry is stressful, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're ordained, whether you're working in a church, whether you're just visiting a church, whether you're just making coffee it's stressful. I've identified 37 core competencies that you got to be able to do if you're going to be a successful minister in the 21st century. That's a lot. That is a lot. And the way that we have to, and again, this isn't just for ordained clergy, I'm just talking church life, the way we got to be able to flip from one thing to the next. You come out, you just done preaching, you've given a 30-minute oral presentation with no notes on a topic that could absolutely infuriate half your congregation, while the other half wants to slobber all over you and send you cards. Then you got to come out, all kinds of people want to shake your hand. Half the people that want to shake your hand have something they need to bring up. Pastor, just don't forget, you got my mom's funeral on Tuesday. I haven't told you about it yet, but I just need you to be there. Black suit is fine. Okay, all right. And there's a long line, and then right away you're praying with somebody who's just been diagnosed with cancer. Right away you get somebody who's got a brand new baby and wants you to just see and appreciate their baby. How do you go from grief to glory in 1 second over and over and over and over again on a Sunday? Never mind the fact that your own family's running up to you and they want your time and attention, but you can't because you can't get this, human thing off your leg. And it's just a mess, right? It's stressful. But Jane McGonigal told us that there's something that's positive stress. And this really helped me reframe a lot of ministry. And it also helped me reclaim a lot of the good and enjoyable ministry from my past. And I know that the way I'm wired, I want to do big projects. That gives me life. I just finished a big project, like I said. I'm in the middle of a big project. I've just finished my research and written a first draft, a follow-up book on the adventure of happiness about hope called How to See the Future. So you'll get that material this afternoon. You'll be my guinea pigs, And so I like that. I'm better. I'm healthier, happier when I've got self-inflicted stress. And so I wanted to find out what it is. So there's 3 qualities that determine whether or not your stress is good or bad, whether or not it gives life and causes you to grow, expand, stretch forward, or whether or not it's going to slowly kill you and lead to all the stress research that you're already aware of. Those 3 qualities are challenge, Do you feel as though your skills, abilities, and character are being put to the test such that you are being stretched to the absolute limit of what you can already do well? If the answer is yes, then you can get excited about this new thing. You can get really excited about it. Because you know you're going to grow, and a growth mindset is one of the most essential ingredients for happiness. What's the first one? Challenge. The second one is control. Are you the one who's setting your deadlines? Are you the one who's setting out your workflow? Are you making the decisions, or are you at least involved in the decisions that directly affect you? And again, we don't all get to make all the decisions about our lives. I don't decide when my son's football games are. I just decide that I have to cancel everything else so I can go sit in the rain. I mean, that's what I have control over. But if you can take some measure of control, rather than feeling helpless or listless. So what are they? We've got the first one: challenge, control, support. Now, you are not ever going to have the amount of support you think you need. You will always feel unsupported when you're at your low moments. And the preacher in me wants to remind you, you don't really need support. You got the Holy Spirit. If that's not enough, we're in trouble. But the Father in me knows we need support, of course. But finding out how to get support and cultivating the support around us is very, very tricky. But it's essential if the stress is going to be good instead of bad. And so we have to learn how to communicate more specifically what it is we think we need from our significant other, from our children, what it is we think we need from our congregation, from our associates, our peers, whatever. And so that's really on us. And most of the time, what I found, not only in my own experience, which I'll share momentarily, but also in my work as a coach or a consultant or as a professor, if you will tell the people in your life what you want, they'll give it to you. They'll give it to you. Now, if you say, I want to be left alone and write my book, they'll give you that space alone for a while, but then you're going to want something different. And if you don't articulate what that is, there's going to be all kinds of friction and tension. So in my family, we used to do, I write recreationally. I've written all kinds of books and pamphlets and nonsense and papers and articles. And I used to have an office in our basement. And I would go down into my office and I would lock the door. Because otherwise, my children, who were little at the time, would just be all over me. I couldn't get any work done. They'd climb up on my lap, and it's not like they would do it once or twice. They just wouldn't leave me alone. They're like kittens. They just are everywhere, you know. So my wife's name is Carmel. I'd say, Carmel, you gotta get the kids off me. I am doing the work of the Lord. So eventually, she kindly reminded me that maybe the work of the Lord in my family was more important than the work of the Lord on my laptop. Actually, that was a bigger conversation, as I'm sure you can imagine. I'm not the holiest person in our family, apparently. But what I learned was what I really need is I don't need isolation. I just need permission. I need permission to work. And so I needed permission from my children. So we made some changes. Instead of working in my basement office, we turned that into something else. And now I work upstairs in the living room. I work almost every day for probably 3 or 4 hours at a time on our couch in our living room where there's bright light and everybody has access to me. And it's a little creepy because church people would drive by our house and text me, hey, I see you're writing a book. Hey, get out of my window. But not the kids will sit next to me. They'll ask me what I'm working on. This is the primary mechanism for discipleship in our home. Is my children will sit next to me and they'll say, Dad, what you working on? I'm working on hope. Oh, yeah? Oh, well, you know the scripture in Jeremiah 29? I know the plans I have for you. I've been thinking about that a lot. And we don't do family devotions. We do this. It's part of the warp and woof of who we are. And man, is that better for me. And wow, has that produced good fruit in my wife and in my children. And so you just need to learn how to articulate what it is you really need. I didn't need isolation. I needed permission. In my job at Westwinds, there's certain things I need. I need freedom. I need the freedom to have a messy desk. I need the freedom to invite people into the life God has for them in ways that are maybe non-traditional. And so for you, in order for you to feel supported, you have to learn first to articulate what you need, and that's on you. Get really clear about what you want, what'll be life-giving to you, and whose responsibility that is, and then articulate to them. And I, as you know, you could all be the first, but I yet have had anyone do that and then come back and say, they told me no. Because believe it or not, the people that love you actually love you. Even if they don't like you, they still want to be a support for you. So that's the mechanism for positive stress, is challenge, control, and support. And this is the trickiest one. And this is the one that has the biggest responsibility on us. And if we can reframe our stresses into eustress, into positive stress, that not only removes a major barrier to our happiness, that gives us access to a whole new elevation of happiness in our work. All right, we're going to go ahead and take some questions. It's 20 to 12. My time on happiness is almost done. So after hearing all of this, I'm sure you have some leftover things. Fire them, and I will answer them one at a time this time instead of a big, long list. He said he's happiest when he has a really bad joke to tell to his colleagues. Excellent.
My apologies to the rest of the group. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to notes. And so, did you cover the essential biases for living happily yet? I'm particularly interested in the iterating versus defending.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't cover that. I tried to give you extra material in the handout so that you wouldn't, when you got bored of listening to me talk, you could read what I wrote. Yeah, the one you're talking about, there's 3 essential biases if you want to be happy. One of them is that you need to keep iterating rather than defending. So most of us defend what we already do, defend what we already know, defend how we already are, because we feel like we've got it figured out. You're going to be miserable if you're like that. You need to stay malleable, stay fluid, always be tweaking and changing. And this is the most unpopular opinion I have. So if you ain't been offended yet, get ready, okay? The silliest thing in the world is the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not change just for the sake of change. One of the things that's killing us is our refusal to change. I mean, it's killing our spirits, it's killing our churches. I mean, how do we want to get into what it's doing statistically to denominations in America? Is not good. So when we say, well, if we're going to make any change, we better make sure it's the right change. We want to be strategic about the change. And you are changing so slowly, by the time you implement the world's greatest change, it's not even relevant anymore. You got change committees, you got change initiatives, it's a disaster. You got to be fast, you got to be fluid. Because that's the way our culture works, that's the way our world works, that's where we live. So we just have to just recognize that whatever we're doing now, we're not going to be doing that in 6 weeks. And we're not going to be doing that 6 weeks from now and 6 weeks from now. And that actually takes a lot of the anxiety out of it. Because once you know we're going to be changing, we're going to be changing a bunch of things over and over again. We're going to continually tweak. We're going to, the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen and all that good stuff. I mean, we know we don't have it totally figured out, so we're going to try. We're going to do some experiments. That actually reduces the anxiety. For example, you can think, I'm sure, of a number of churches who've had a disastrous transition from a traditional service to a contemporary service. First, can we please acknowledge that nobody wants to go to your contemporary service either? This is awful, right? I mean, contemporary is like that's how they did church in 1973. This is not contemporary. So we do this, and then we give our whole church like whiplash and motion sickness because now we're doing this brand new thing, but the brand new thing stinks, and it's the change we made, and now we're stuck with it. Well, keep changing. Don't change back. Just keep changing over and over and over again. And again, this is particularly pertaining to happiness. So you'll be happier if you accept that you need to continually be changing over and over and over again. But then, of course, there's some application for church stuff there too. So I forgot I put that in the notes. I'm glad you brought it up. Thanks.
So following on to that, if you have, I guess, a congregation who maybe is older and unwilling to change, and yet you're trying to service both them and the people who want that change, how do you satisfy both ends and make your congregation happy?
Yeah. Now, I'll answer how I've done that, and that might not work for everybody, you know, so I'll qualify. There's the snarky answer, and then there's the leadership helpful answer. I'll give you the snarky one first because it's my favorite thing to say. But it's a whole lot easier to give birth to a baby than it is to raise the dead, all right? And the real pastor answer is you know, you got people in your church that want different things. Don't force them to want the same thing. I'm a member of a gym, you know, and so I work out. The gym has jiu-jitsu, it has Pilates, it has yoga, it has like adult fitness classes for people who are like just starting to work out. It has a running club. It has the meat locker, you know, where all the big, huge bodybuilders go and work out. And then it has a CrossFit gym. And I get to do any of those things that I want. And my wife gets to do any of those things that she wants. And my children get to do any of those. And we don't always want the same thing. And that doesn't mean that we're not unified as a family. It just means that, like, we have different fitness goals and we have different needs and we're wired differently. And I was a rugby player. My wife is a basketball player. Those are just different muscle groups. Those are different memories. Those are different stresses on the bodies. We have different needs even though we're totally unified. And I think church is like that. You know, you can still be one body even if you're going to different services. And most churches, when they're first introduced to that idea, are really resistant to it. Even when you go from one service to two and the two services are exactly the same. But the truth is, you can still be one family even if you're doing two different things. And so I think for me, certainly in all my pastoral experience, I've had the most success starting new ventures. And I'll go to the people who want something different and I'll say, hey, what could this become? You know, because we're not trying to split off and start a new church. We just want to start a new offering. In the same way that people could be doing CrossFit or they could be lifting weights, we just want to say, look, you could be going to the service at 9 o'clock and you could be going to the service at 6 o'clock. Let's just talk about what this might become. And I try not to come to that with a preconceived idea of what the new thing should be. So I really, now our church is often celebrated as one of the most creative churches in America. CNN said that, Time Magazine said that, New York Times said that, Len Sweet first said it. I think he was the one that polluted the rest of them with this idea, you know. But I don't think about it in terms of what's the next creative thing we're going to do. I just say, what's God saying to us? What might this become? And it's like you're watering a flower to see what it's going to grow into. And the same is true with our existing services. I go, if I nourish this existing service and this existing group of people so that they are perfectly taken care of, what is it going to grow into? And a lot of times, if there's other people who have ideas that are different than that, even if I really like those new ideas, those other ideas will sort of strangle out the health of the existing thing. So then I just plant them over here, rather than making them compete for resources and fight and get grouchy. Does that help? Yes, sort of.